I will be reading from Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
Good morning. If you'll please hold your text open to that, we'll come back to that, Lord willing, in just a little bit. But first, I want to play you a video clip, if in fact it's going to work. And if it doesn't, it's my fault, not the fault of the guys in the back. But in the process of researching for this morning's lesson, I found several video clips, and I kept saying, man, that's good. I need to show that. Oh, man, that one's even better than that one. I need to show that one. So I finally decided on this one. It's about 4 minutes and 15 seconds long, something like that. If it works, even if it doesn't work, it's still 4 minutes and 15 seconds. But the guy that you'll see on this that's being interviewed by Fox News. His name is Eric Metaxas, and he's a believer in the Bible. He's a believer in God, and he also hosts something called Socrates in the City, where they talk about spiritual things and the existence of God as opposed to the ideas of atheism, and it's very well received in New York City. And he also writes a lot of books, and a lot of those books are about the very things that he's going to be talking about this morning, spiritual things, things about God, and the ideas of God being existing and having something to do in our lives and wanting something to do. That's the kind of guy Eric is, and so he's written a new book, and I'll just sit down and see if we can watch this video and get an idea of what it's all about.
Thanks, Liz. One of the most popular articles on the wallstreetjournal.com right now, it's an opinion piece. It's about how science increasingly makes the case for God. Eric Metaxas wrote the article. He's the author of the book, Miracles, What They Are, Why They Happen, and How They Can Change Your Life. And he joins us right now. All right, Eric, science makes the case for the existence of God. Tell me how that works.
I have no idea, but it's true. The article I wrote in the Wall Street Journal, I give the basics of it. Of course, if people want citations and things, they can read my book, and I give footnotes. But the point is that for the last 30 or so years, the more we know from science, with the advanced science that we have every day getting better, the more it seems clear that there is virtually no possibility that the universe could have been created by accident. Even atheists have been greatly shaken by this. Some of them, the most famous atheist of the 20th century, Anthony Flew, about 10 years ago, came over to the side of believing in God. Maybe not the God of the Bible, but in a God who created the universe. This is a sort of breaking news, but you never read about it. So the article has been shockingly popular. I'm very happy to say so.
So the Big Bang, the theory that it was a Big Bang, the circumstances which created that Big Bang are so wildly impossible.
Well, there's something called the four fundamental forces. I'm not a physicist, I'm not a scientist, although I'm happy to pretend to be one on this show. But the point is that I have to tell you that people who don't want to believe in a God look at those four fundamental forces and say they're calibrated so utterly perfectly that it's chilling, that many of them say something is going on here, even though they may not believe in God. It's troubling. It's shaking their atheism.
You mean that there must be an unseen hand guiding the creation?
According to secular atheists, they say, some of them, Fred Hoyle, who coined the term the Big Bang. You're friends with Fred? He coined the term the Big Bang. He's the one who said it looks like a super intellect has monkeyed with the physics, the chemistry. This is a man who said that his atheism was shaken. And I think people need to know this. It doesn't prove anything, but it's tremendous evidence, and we need to deal with the evidence.
You're getting some criticism about what you wrote. I'm going to quote from an article on the website called Addicting Info. Eric Metaxas is best known as a biographical writer. He's also lauded for his work, making sweeping, outrageous conclusions about the existence of God based on whatever tenuous evidence seems handy at the time. If sweeping, outrageous conclusions be Metaxas' bread and butter, then the Wall Street Journal article is perhaps his magnum opus. It's a doozy. Well, that's
the polite way of responding is to say balderdash, sir. Here's what I would say. The reason people are upset by this is because rarely do you read about this. There's no doubt in my mind. Listen to this. Christopher Hitchens, one of the greatest atheists, proponents of atheism of our time, he said, and I've got the video on my website, he said that this fine-tuning argument is the single most powerful argument of the other side. And he said that most of his colleagues, he believed, would concur. So anyone who wants to dismiss this has to deal with Christopher Hitchens.
You know,
there's no doubt.
Physicist Richard Smalley said, how can we know what we can't see? In other words, atheists are always pretending that they know, but with your limited 5 senses as human beings, how can you fully understand the universe, right?
Well, that's the whole thing. In fact, science is limited. Science really can't say one way or the other, but it can lead us to believe that. And I actually believe that everything in my book, not just this kind of thing, leads us to believe that there is evidence.
Most popular article ever on WallStreetJournal.com.
In the history of Wall Street Journal online. And it's not because of my writing, but because this subject is a subject.
It's the premise.
People have a hunger to know, are there miracles? Is there a God? What can we know? We should have this conversation in the mainstream.
Eric Metaxas, thank you very much indeed, sir.
Thank you.
By the way, that interview was done January the 15th of this year, so it's very current. Now, if somebody were to tell you, hey, I just heard about the most popular article ever in Wall Street Journal, what would you think the most popular article ever in Wall Street Journal would be about? I would think something on Wall Street. But it's this. People want to know about God. People want to know about God. Now, it's interesting, when you go to the Bible, and by the way, as I get started on this, faith in God is what we have, and it's all we're going to have. It's faith in God. You cannot prove God's existence. You go to the other side, however, faith in the non-existence of God is all atheists have. They place their faith in the idea that God does not exist. There is no science to prove one way or the other. And I would also like to say that science and religion, science and God, science and the Bible, are not at odds with each other. Real science. Every time real science is discovered, it agrees with what the Scriptures teach. Real science, not philosophical science, not ideological science, but real science. Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, the very first verse of the Bible. By the way, Johnny was happy to get that assignment. He said, what's the Scripture going to be? I said, it's going to be the first verse of the Bible. Can you remember that? I think so. Did a great job, by the way. Always does. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. There it is. Boom. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, you, like me, perhaps, would like to have that next verse that said, here's how God came to be. You don't get that. Here's who God is. We don't get that. There's this simple statement in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. When you're telling the truth, you don't always have to explain things. Have you ever noticed that? As a matter of fact, when you're asking somebody to answer a question, it's usually the shortest answer that is going to be the most accurate. When somebody starts kind of going around the barn, and sometimes you have to. Sometimes you got to give background and context and go around the barn, but a lot of times the shortest answer is the best. This is very brief. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. There is an argument for the existence of God called the cosmological argument, C-O-S-M-O, logical, cosmological. And it's the idea that there was a first cause, an initial cause. In other words, if you look at anything in the universe that exists, you say, well, that exists, so something must have caused it. And then when you find out what caused it, you say, well, what caused the thing that caused that? And then you go back and back and back. For example, I'm here because of my mom and dad. Well, where'd my mom and dad come from? Well, they came from their moms and dads. Well, where'd their moms and dads? Well, they came from their moms and dads. Back, if you study genealogy, you know all about this. Who do they go back to? They go back to Adam and Eve. That's what the Scriptures teach us. Everything goes back. Well, where did Adam and Eve come from? We believe, our faith is that they were created by God just as He told us He did in the first 2 chapters of Genesis. Made Adam from dirt. And interesting, if somebody dies, if anybody dies, it doesn't matter how big you are in the world or how little you are in the world. When you die, you lay your body out and you watch it to keep animals and things away. What's going to happen to that body? It's going to go back to dirt. That's what God said originally. I made Adam from dirt. Made Eve the crowning creation of the universe. The woman, wow, pretty neat. Made her from Adam's rib. But the same thing happens to her when she dies. She goes back to dirt. Cosmological, first cause. Back and back and back we go until finally, what is the first cause? We believe the first cause is God. Atheism has no answer. Now, scientifically, we can argue from the standpoint of the first two laws of thermodynamics. You can look those up on your own, but those are scientific laws that say that the earth cannot, or the universe cannot be eternal. If it's not eternal, what did it once have? It once had a beginning. Some would say that beginning was the Big Bang. Well, okay, what made the Big Bang? You got to go back before that. And some say, well, it was a little spot of matter about as big as the size of a period in the end of a sentence. Now, you look it up. I'm not making this up. This is what is postulated about the Big Bang. Well, where'd that come from? Well, it was just there. Well, where'd God come from? Well, he was just there. You see, it's the same faith. We have faith that it's God. We can't explain that in detail, but they can't either. Now, the difference sometimes is, not always, but sometimes the difference is they will tell you they can explain it. And generally, it's been my experience, not hearsay, but my experience, and I don't mean to categorize and castigate all people who claim to be atheists, who claim to be non-believers, but most of them, when they get to the point where they can't explain anything, that's when they start to call you names. Anybody else experience this? Or they start to talk about how stupid you are for believing what you believe. And they're very condescending, very arrogant. Not all of them, but my experience has been with several of them that when you get to the point where they can't explain scientifically what they're trying to put across to you, then they'll start to mock you, which is exactly what Peter says in 2 Peter chapter 3. In the last days, mockers will come. And what are they going to mock? Well, they're going to mock the things that we believe are the truth, as represented not only by Scripture, but by scientific evidence that abounds. And so the cosmological argument is an argument for God that you can remember. There had to be an initial cause. We believe God to be that cause. Atheists have no answer. And the universe cannot be eternal. Now, when it says God created the heavens and the earth in the beginning, David comes along thousands of years later and he says this in Psalm 19. If you want to turn to Psalm 19. Let's read what he says in the first 6 verses of Psalm 19. The heavens are doing something. What are the heavens doing? The heavens are telling of the glory of God. And their expanse is declaring the work of his hands. Day to day pours forth speech, and night to night reveals knowledge. There is no speech, nor are there words. Their voice is not heard. Their line has gone out through all the earth, and their utterances to the end of the world. In them he has placed a tent for the sun, which is as a bridegroom coming out of his chamber. It rejoices as a strong man to run his course. Its rising is from one end of the heavens, and its circuit to the other end of them, and there is nothing hidden from its heat. What is David talking about? He's talking about the creation, but not just the creation. He's saying the creation, when you look at it, declares not only the existence of God, that's kind of taken for granted, but it declares His glory, His outstanding, unimaginable, imperceptible glory. Now, we can see it to a certain degree, but we can't see it all. You remember what Moses was told when he wanted to see God? He said, well, I'd put you in my presence, but it would kill you. God's glory is what David is talking about here. Now, if you were to see anything that is created, you could look at that creation and tell something about the skill of the creator. Whether it's a house or a car, a computer, an article of clothing, you can look at something that's been made, that's been crafted, and you can see the craftsmanship, regardless of whether it's high quality or low quality. You can see that. And that will tell you something about the skill of the creator. And that's what David is saying. But David's about to make a transition in verse 7. And we'll talk about that transition in a minute, but I want you to consider the first 6 verses with regard to what's called the teleological argument. Teleos, from the Greek word teleos, meaning complete or perfect. It's also called the argument from design. When you see something that appears to be designed, what do you assume that there must be? Must be a designer. There must be somebody behind it who designed it. If you found a footprint in the sand, as one author postulated years ago, what would you expect to find somewhere? A foot, a person, somebody who made that. You wouldn't look at the footprints. Oh, look how that just accidentally formed from the wind blowing and the rain coming down. It's footprint, especially if you've got 5 or 6 of them in a row. Nobody would do that. You'd look at the footprint, and if that's all you had, you'd say, there's a person around here someplace, stuck a foot in the sand. Anybody in their logical thinking, reasonable thinking mind would make that assumption. And we have all around us a declaration of God's glory. We see this design and we say there's got to be somebody who designed this. Why is it that the sun, as we say, comes up every morning? And you might remember we talked about this sometime, I don't know how long ago it was, but technically, does the earth come up? Well, no, the earth rolls. But it's not very romantic to say to somebody, hey, did you see that beautiful earth roll this morning? It appears to be the sun rising. We know it doesn't rise. We know the earth rolls and we see it and we behold it. Wow, isn't that great? How many days does the sun come up? Every day, all of them. Is there any consistency to that? Well, duh. We also read in the scriptures that when God created the planets and the moon, He created them for times and for seasons and for lights. Greater lights and lesser lights. That's what God reveals to us in the creation account. And we look at this and we say, wow, it's been designed and it works and it keeps on working the way it's always worked. Aren't you glad? And by the way, one of the things Eric mentioned were those 4 powers in the universe. Those are magnetism. Did you know the earth had a magnetic field? It's got a magnetic field. We also have gravity. There are also 2 nuclear forces. Now, I'm like him. I don't claim to be a scientist and know all these things, although all of us to some degree are scientists. But there's a powerful nuclear force and a weak nuclear force, and all of these things are fine-tuned. What would it be like if we woke up one day and gravity was force X, and we woke up the next day and gravity was force Y? And it changed from one day to another. Today, I weigh 100 and 200 and none of your business. Tomorrow, I might weigh more, I might weigh less. What would that do to your muscle structure or your skeletal structure if your weight doubled every other day? Or if there was a month of the year when gravity doubled, wouldn't we say, oh man, it's going to be September again and we're going to weigh 500 pounds instead of 250 pounds, which is not what I weigh, by the way. But it doesn't work like that. Everything is consistent. Everything is, by the way, you ever wonder, why doesn't the earth get hit with meteors more often that would wipe us out and all these comets and things going through, but why don't they hit the earth? Well, that's because we've got these large planets circling the earth and their gravitational force pulls all of that junk to them and allows very little of it to get to us. You think that's just by accident? You talk about design, it's just all over the place. That's why all of this, and the more we learn, which is what Eric was pointing out, the more we learn about real science, the more evidence that there is a God, a designer who has designed all of these things. Now the transition, verse 7, Psalm 19, verse 7. The law of the Lord is perfect. What were we talking about in the first 6 verses? Talking about the creation, the physical creation. And we know there are physical laws that govern that creation, but now we're talking about spiritual laws. Verse 7, the law of the Lord is perfect, restoring the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. The precepts of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes. The fear of the Lord is clean, enduring forever. The judgments of the Lord are true, they're righteous altogether. He goes on for a little bit more. But you see the transition and you see the truth that's here about the law and the teachings of God. If you look at a house that a builder makes, you can see the quality and the skill and the talent of the builder. But you really don't know anything about that builder's character until you do what? Until you in some way meet that builder and you have a conversation with that builder. or you hear something from him that tells you in some way what he values. And then you learn something about his character. This is the distinction I think that David is bringing to us by virtue of the inspiration of the Holy Spirit. Having him write these words down, the heavens declare the glory of God. The firmament shows his handiwork, but his law is what makes a difference to me on a human basis. It makes all the difference in the world. So we're talking about the teleological argument, the argument from design, but we're also talking about another argument here called the moral argument. This is one of those powerful arguments for the existence of God. And it's the fact that all of humanity has a sense of morality. Why is that? If we came from nothing, if there was no purpose for our existence, it was unguided, why is it so universal that people believe in a sense of morality? They don't just believe in it, they have it. And you can't get away from it. You have to teach and train yourselves for years to stop having a sense of morality. Why is it? Now, our moralities might be different. One person might look on one thing that we would call sin and say that's okay, and we'll look at it and say, oh, that's not okay. But it's still a sense of morality. It's still a sense of right and wrong. And how can there be any real right and wrong if there is no God? I mean, when you think about it, say you're an atheist. Did you exist before you were conceived? Well, of course not. There's no metaphysical explanation or reason to believe that you existed before you were conceived. Isn't it fantastic? Kerry got up here and talked about that this morning. I had no idea what he was going to talk about. He probably still doesn't have any idea what I'm talking about. But he talks about that singular aspect of creation where two tiny microscopic cells come together and they've got all that information there that forms us. And it just blows you away. But according to an atheist, you didn't exist before that. Now those two cells will come together in conception. They'll develop, let's assume, into a baby. And that baby will be birthed into this world and live a life 70, 80, 90 years and die. What happens at death? You're gone. You're absolutely gone. There is nothing left of you except your body that's going to become dust. You go back to the molecules of this planet. And there's nothing left. So there's nothing to start you. There's nothing to end you. You've just got this little tiny parentheses in time that your existence is a blip. So why does anything matter in that parentheses? How could you argue that something that takes place in that little parenthetical thing that is your existence in the universe, how could any of that matter? If you came from nothing and you're going to nothing, anything you would do, it's going to be gone as soon as you're gone. Anything you would enjoy, it's going to be gone as soon as you're gone. Everything about you, everything that is you, would be coming to nothing. You and I know that that's not instinctively what we believe. And when I say instinctively, I'm talking about something we believe, we recognize before anybody comes to the Bible. We know there's something more. As a matter of fact, if you turn to Ecclesiastes, the 3rd chapter, you look at the first part of the 3rd chapter of Ecclesiastes, and it says there's an appointed time for everything. Now, there's so much here that I'd like to talk about and address that I can't talk about and address because we just don't have time. But think about the very fact of the matter that you and I can consider and conceive of time. The fact that we can conceive of anything. Albert Einstein, I think he was kind of a smart guy. I don't know about you. Albert Einstein said the most incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it is comprehensible. Think about that. Einstein made that observation. I think it's an accurate observation. The most incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it is comprehensible. If we came from nothing, why would we be able to make sense? As a matter of fact, how could there be any sense? If you and I are just accidents, if there was no God bringing us to be and calling us into question at the end, into judgment, well, it just defies reason, defies logic to me. But you get down through all these things for which there is a time, and you get down to verse 11. It says, He's made everything appropriate in its time. He has also set eternity in their heart, yet so that man will not find out the work which God has done from the beginning even to the end. Now that phraseology, that idea that God has set eternity in our heart, humans know instinctively this isn't all there is. This life, this physical life. We know there's something more coming. We have to teach and train ourselves not to believe that. People worship instinctively over all the earth throughout time. That's one of the ways we know that artifacts we find were human artifacts, because they have religious articles with them. That's one of the things archaeologists look for. Humans worship instinctively. Why? Especially if we came from nothing to begin with. We've got eternity in our heart. God put it there. There's this other argument called the ontological argument. Ontological from the not Greek, but Latin word for being. The study of being, the study of existence. And it's really something to think about, to study our existence. We just sort of take it for granted. But if you think about it, how many other creatures on the planet are really aware of their existence? Think about things. I mean, you buy a dog, you get the smartest dog you can get, you put him in your backyard, what's he going to do? He's probably going to dig holes, try to get out. Animals are animals. That's why it's okay, thank you, Lord, to kill and eat them. They're just animals. They don't have souls. They don't have a conscience like we have a conscience. I've never been in the woods hanging in my tree and had a deer come underneath me and look up, wow, great camouflage, dude. I've been down here for 20 minutes and you haven't, wow, God, that's really good. What are you out here for? Oh, you're here to hunt, aren't you? You're saying, Marty, you're being crazy. Well, yeah, I'm being crazy because animals don't think like that. But we do. We are sentient. We have a conscience. We can think through things. We can determine for us what is right and wrong. We have the same kind of mental ability that God has to a degree. He's given that to us. And He's given us a will. I don't know that animals really have a will. They just act according to what animals do. And it's very hard to reason with animals because they're animals. But God has put eternity in the hearts of human beings. You and I have that marvelous blessing. I think about being an atheist. If I was an atheist, I don't think I would spend my life trying to convince people that there is no God. If you were an atheist, what would you, if you really didn't believe in God, for instance, I think I've said this before, I don't know anybody who spends their whole life and puts their life's work into proving to people that there are no unicorns. Why is that? Because everybody knows there aren't any unicorns. And even if you finally convinced people that believed in unicorns that there weren't any unicorns, where would you be? It just doesn't make sense to make. How about gnomes and elves? Why would you spend your life trying to prove to people that there are no gnomes or are no elves? But people spend their life. They write books. They do research to try to convince people that there is no God. If there really isn't a God, is that how you want to spend your little bit of time in existence? Man, I'd be going out having fun. But even that wouldn't matter. No matter how much fun I had, it's all coming to nothing, is it not? Now, I know there's another side to this, and atheists can argue the other side, but the bottom line is, if I live my life as a Christian and find out there is no God, then I haven't lost anything because I'm going to nothing anyway. I came from nothing and I'm going to nothing, and what I believe in the interim period makes no difference whatsoever. Talk about the greater good of humanity. What do you mean a greater good of humanity? I'm an accident in the universe. You're an accident in the universe. The universe isn't even supposed to be here. What are you doing talking to me about truth and some higher good? There is no higher good. Mao Zedong was right when he killed 70 million Chinese. 70 million Chinese. What's his background? Well, he's an atheist. What is it that allowed him to wipe out 70 million of his country? Now somebody says, oh, Marty, that's a high estimate. Some estimates range down to about 50 million. Oh, okay, just 50 million. Oh, no big deal. Joseph Stalin. Now estimates range between 20 and 60 million for Joseph, of his own countrymen he killed. Joseph Stalin himself said, the death of one man is a tragedy. The death of millions, a statistic. Now that's what you get from an atheistic mindset. Now so often people who don't believe in God will point to the church, to Christianity, and they'll say, oh, look what the horrible things that Christianity has done to the earth. Well, they've caused more wars and rumors of wars, and they had the Inquisition and all those things. Well, in the first place, that was not Bible-practicing Christians. Now, that might make some people upset. But Jesus did not build a kingdom on this earth so the kingdom, the church, could go to war against people who didn't believe like we do. As a matter of fact, what are you supposed to do when somebody slaps you on the right cheek? Create an atom bomb. Now, governments are free to do those kinds of things. God gave governments the freedom to keep order, to bear the sword, so that those who would do the things that are wrong would live in fear of those who bear the sword. God puts that responsibility in the hands of governments. That's why I believe it's okay for Christians to serve the government as a policeman and carry a gun and carry a nightstick. And when somebody needs to get hit with that stick, I don't know if they carry sticks anymore, or to be tased, or to be shot. That's the government bearing the sword. Or to serve in the military, same thing. But that's not the work of Christians. But everything that so-called Christians have done through history pale to insignificance at the atrocities done in the name or under the umbrella of atheism. But if you're truly an atheist, why not? If you're truly an atheist, why not kill everybody you don't like? If you're truly an atheist, why not rape every woman you have an opportunity to rape? Or child? If you're truly an atheist, why not rob from people that have things you want to have? If you're truly an atheist, you know you're never going to have to answer to any higher power. There isn't any higher power. You're not even doing wrong by doing any of those things morally, because there is no morality. You do what you want. And so as an atheist, you do what you want. But if you're wrong as an atheist, and your final day comes, where will you be? If you're wrong as a Christian, you know you're no worse off than the atheist. Same thing's going to happen to him that happens to you. You're just going to go away into nothingness. No remembrance, no regrets of things you didn't get to do while you were alive because you spent all your time wasting it being a Christian. Well, every moment is wasted if there is no God, because there's nothing coming. But we know. We know because God has written it in our hearts that there's something coming. And so I try to discuss these things with people anymore, based not so much on science and Big Bang and arguments here and arguments there, but I try to appeal to people based on what they know within themselves. Have you ever done anything wrong? Well, sure, I've done things wrong. You feel any guilt? Well, yeah, sure, I feel guilt. You have any option to handle that guilt if you're an atheist? Well, no. There's no option except to try to train myself to believe that there's no such thing as guilt. 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 Drive you mad. Because everything in you says, oh yeah, there is. You'll even feel guilty for telling yourself there's no such thing as guilt. But a Christian is what I would want everybody to be if I were an atheist. I mean, it makes sense to me. If I'm an atheist and I don't believe in God, the last thing I want you to do is to believe there is no God. I want you to believe that you have a God and you have a Jesus who says to you, treat me with respect. I want you to believe that you have a God that tells you, don't steal from Marty. Always be honest with Marty. Be kind to him. And even if you're condescending in your wrong sense of self-righteousness, at least Marty knows you're never going to hurt him because you believe in God. But if you're an atheist, well, I think the numbers from atheist regimes show us something. At any rate, bring this lesson to a conclusion and extend an invitation that for the present time is open. But we know the reality of time. And we know that it's limited. I mean, you can argue God all you want, but you and I know our time is limited. At some point, our time is going to be over. Are you going to be ready when that time is up? That's the question. If you've been baptized into Christ, if you believe in God, you need to believe in His Son. You need to repent of your sin, confess His name, and put Him on in baptism. I know it seems crazy to a lot of people, but it's the truth, and God's always done things in a crazy way that would be crazy to us. How do you heal people of snake bite? Well, you make a bronze snake, put it on a stick, and when people go to look at that, they'll be all right. How are we going to get away from these Egyptians? Oh, don't worry, I'll just part the Red Sea and just walk across on dry land. What are we going to eat out here in the wilderness? Oh, don't worry about it. When you get up every morning, there'll be some manna for you. It'll feed you. What are we going to drink? What? Have Moses go over there and talk to that rock. Water come out of that rock, feed millions of people. Quench their thirst. How am I going to be saved from my sins? Well, put your faith in Jesus and let somebody dunk you in water. Reenacting the death and the burial and the resurrection. Wow. That's the way God works. You know why He works that way? Because it's all about faith. And that's what this all comes down to. No matter which side you're on, it all comes down to faith. What are you going to do with your faith this morning as we stand and sing the invitation song?
Go tell it on the mountain, over the hills and everywhere. Go tell it on the mountain that Jesus Christ is born. The shepherds all were watching while seated on the ground. A light from heaven descended, and glory shone around. Go tell it on the mountain, over the hills and everywhere. Go tell it on the mountain that Jesus Christ is born. This light shone in the heavens to cover all the earth. It was a sign to tell men about our Savior's birth. Go tell it on the mountain, over the hills and everywhere. Go tell it on the mountain that Jesus Christ is born. The wise men came to worship the holy child that day. They found him in the manger, asleeping on the hay. Go tell it on the mountain, over the hills and everywhere. Go tell it on the mountain that Jesus Christ is born. If there are no additional things, Steve Howes is coming up and